Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Reynolds with B.O.R.E.D, Better Off Reading Every Day. Today's book is Disney Princess, My Perfect Wedding. Cinderella's dreams were coming true at last. She and the prince were going to be married, and a new life filled with happiness would soon begin. But first, there was a wedding to plan. Prudence, Cinderella's lady-in-waiting, was in charge of the planning. She had a very long list of tasks. "Excuse me, Cinderella," asked Prudence. "Couldn't we just have a simple wedding?" Prudence frowned. "Cinderella, now that you are going to be a princess, you must start thinking big." Later, Prudence arrived with the royal dressmaker and several wedding gowns. "Do you think you can design something plainer?" Cinderella asked politely. "Certainly not," Prudence said. "Plain and princess do not go together." Next, it was time to select the flowers. The florist greeted them with a rose bush. "Do you have something a bit smaller?" Cinderella asked. "This is perfect," Prudence said. "You just have to know how to carry it." Prudence held the flowers out in front of her, and buzz, she was stung by a bee. Prudence had gone to bed to nurse her bee sting. "I'll have the wedding myself," Cinderella said to the mice. "Now, what should I do first?" "Who's coming, Cinderella?" asked Jacques. The guest list. Good idea, Jacques. "Well, of course, all of you are invited," Cinderella replied, "and my fairy godmother. I wish she were here right now." Suddenly, a twinkling light flickered the room, and Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. "We'll plan an absolutely magical wedding for you, my dear," she said, giving Cinderella a big hug. "Now, when is it exactly?" Gus counted on his fingers. "Tomorrow," he announced. "Oh my goodness, child," cried the fairy godmother. "Lots to do," Jacques added. "Well then, let's start at the beginning with the dress," the fairy godmother said. She waved her wand, and Cinderella found herself in an elegant white gown. But her fairy godmother had forgotten the veil. "It's lovely," Cinderella said, "but don't you think it needs—" The fairy godmother wasn't listening. She was already working on the next task, invitations. In moments, hundreds of lovely pink cards sat in stacks around the room. "Now we shall prepare the feast and make the cake," she announced. Cinderella changed out of her gown and followed her fairy godmother to the royal kitchen. The mice picked up where the fairy godmother had left off. Mary, Susie, and Perla pulled out a box of tiny pearls and began making a veil. And Jacques gave each of the other mice an armload of invitations to deliver. Unfortunately, they didn't get very far before Pom Pom the cat showed up. "Whee! Close a call," said Jacques as he and Gus raced away from Pom Pom and scurried into the kitchen. They arrived just in time to help the fairy godmother create a great big fancy cake. Cinderella tried to hide her disappointment. Prudence will love it," she said. You know, I really should see how she's feeling. Poor child, the fairy godmother said after Cinderella had left. These wedding plans must be too much for her. Jacques and Gus tugged at the fairy godmother's sleeve. Cinderella likes a smaller things, Jacques told her, like mice. All at once, the fairy godmother understood. Later, the fairy godmother took Cinderella's hand. I'm afraid I may have gotten a bit carried away, my dear, the fairy godmother confessed. Now tell me, child, what would the wedding of your dreams be like? After listening to Cinderella, the fairy godmother finished a beautiful veil. Then she got rid of all the invitations by magically sending them to their destinations far, far away, near and far. Now let's cut the cake down to size, the fairy godmother said as they left the kitchen. Cinderella turned towards the kind-hearted mice. Thank you, my little friends, she said gratefully. The next day, Cinderella looked lovingly in her simple white gown, veil, and gloves. But something was missing. Good heavens, child, the fairy godmother exclaimed. You can't get married in your bare feet. She waved her wand, and Cinderella's beautiful glass zippers peeked out from beneath her gown. After the ceremony, the prince and Cinderella shared a joyful celebration with their guests. Even Prudence was pleased. However did you manage all of this? The prince asked his new princess. Cinderella smiled and said, with friends by your side, anything is possible. The end, boys and girls, of Disney Princess, My Perfect Wedding. She was looking for her perfect bouquet, which is right here. She was looking for her perfect veil, which is right here. And of course, her glass slippers, which is right here. Can you see it? And she had her perfect wedding that she had planned. Boys and girls, it's Miss Reynolds with B.O.R.E.D. Better Off Reading Every Day. I chose this book because it's the continuation of the Cinderella story where she fits into the perfect slippers and she's going to marry her prince, and it picks up from there. I just wanted you to see what happens next. So boys and girls, before it gets too late and before all of my guests leave, it's time for me to go and get married. Not really. I'm celebrating today with this special book because it's my 250th book, 250, that I have read to you, and I wanted something special to read to you today, and that's why I chose this book. So, again, my pleasure. Miss Reynolds with B.O.R.E.D. Better Off Reading Every Day. It's been my pleasure to be reading these stories with you. And thank you for reaching 150 with me. It's been my pleasure. And I will see you again, same place, same time, tomorrow. Bye, boys and girls.